I'm super excited about this topic today because the topic I'm about to jump into will double our church in a year if we stay on it. We're just going to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. It is so imperative to us, and it's such an interesting topic that you're going to want to come back and hear it again next week. It's called idolatry. Yeah, exactly. Here's the deal. Probably kidding a bit, but it is a subject that we have to talk about. And the reason we talk about it is because sometimes our hearts are prone to go a little wayward. And I get it. If you hear the word idolatry, it seems like even an antiquated term. Like you're like, it seems like such an old relic from the past. When you think about the whole idea of idolatry, I don't know about you, but I always think about like the golden calf, right? They came out of the Red Sea, Moses on Sinai with God, and his brother is making a golden calf and people are worshiping, right? It seems so antique in the sense that you think carved images and birds and reptiles and people bowing down to all this stuff. It's almost like so far back that it's back when they used to age meat with salt and hang cheese in a cave, right? That's how they did it. And so for us, we're like, I don't deal with any of those things. But let me ask you a question. If you were just to take a few moments and just ponder, like, what is idolatry? Would you resonate with the idea that maybe there is something that you struggle to be content about? But here's the wrestle with idolatry. The wrestle is that, okay, I get that we shouldn't have anything that's above God, right? Nothing in his place. But how do we figure out the rhythm or the tension of this idea of contentment and complacency? For instance, there are some of us in this room, we're like, look, I don't have an idol of work. I work really hard, and I spend a lot of time doing that because we're created to work. And God's honored when we work hard because the New Testament teaches us that we should work. And that's true. Question then becomes, but if I work really hard and I spend a lot of long hours, what is it that I'm building? And is there a point where my contentment actually becomes my idol? How do you figure out that? Like, because there's a lot of us that, I don't know about you, but you're like, I'm looking to retire. And you're like, I can't wait just to kind of like take it easy. I've worked all these years. It's time for me just to be able to be content. Well, how do you figure out that tension? Which one of those is potentially the idol? And in order to kind of begin to kind of lean into that a little bit, I think you have to understand there's a couple of different approaches that you can kind of think of. One would be like the comparative approach. The comparative approach would be to kind of list a few things that you might potentially struggle with. Maybe you kind of, in some ways, put them on the altar of your life in some way and then compare them to God. That's comparative approach. The question is there anything in my life that I value more than God? If they were just a tipping scale, you got God here and you got stuff here, which one wins? Now, the comparative approach can be difficult because in order to get the comparative approach right, you have to ask a second question. And did I just lie? And then it leads to the third question, which is really, really important. Why can't I be honest with myself? Because the question is do you ever realize that we do put stuff in front of God? But if we were just doing the comparative approach, we would say to ourselves, and I always do, like, God, this is something that I'm spending a lot of time doing. I think a lot about it. I have a lot of hours and stress and even some anxiousness around this thing. But God, it does not compare to you. God always wins when I'm doing the comparative approach. Not always, but majority of the time, I tell myself, I don't have a problem. God is number one in my life. Now, you probably don't have that issue, so the comparative approach may just solve it all for you. But then you've got the integrated approach. The integrated approach is this idea that you realize that there is something that is the source of something, but then it emits something that you oftentimes are enamored by. The best example I can give before we jump into the integrated approach would be this. If you're looking at sun rays coming through the window, would you ever bow down and worship the sun rays? No, because you're like, no, that's just a source of something better, right? Like it's just emitting light and you see the sun rays, but it's actually, there's something better. But as we walk through the passages today, we're going to see two. We're going to see an Old Testament passage and a New Testament passage. What I want you to realize that we're going to have to use both of these approaches to kind of land to where we really are currently in real time. Now, in order to do so, there's a great story in Isaiah 44, and if you've been joining us this year in reading through the Bible, we've been walking through the way together. Walking Away is a Bible plan that we created for this year's reading. And right now, we are about to wrap up the book of Isaiah. So Isaiah has 66 chapters. We wrap that up tomorrow, and then we move into the book of Jeremiah. If you haven't been able to read with us, because it's a whole lot, we encourage you on Tuesday to jump in the book of Jeremiah with us. We would love to have you, because every single Sunday, we're teaching through what we've been reading. And so this week, if you have read through Isaiah, you came across Isaiah 44 in really a fantastic passage. And for me, when I read it, I laughed quite a bit. And I'm going to laugh again in just a second. And here's why. Because if you pick up with me in verse 9, it is a pretty interesting thing to see the comparative approach and the integrated approach, the things that we value that oftentimes we don't notice. Okay, here it is in verse 9 of chapter 44. It says, all who fashion idols are nothing, and the things they delight in do not profit. Their witnesses neither see nor know that they may be put to shame. Who fashions a god or casts an idol that is profitable for nothing? Behold, all his companions shall be put to shame. And the craftsmen are only human. Let them all assemble. Let them stand forth. They shall be terrified. They shall be put to shame together. And he gives you two examples. He says there's the ironsmith who takes a cutting tool and works it over the coals. He fashions it with hammers and works it with a strong arm. He becomes hungry and his strength fails. He drinks no water and is faint. The carpenter, he stretches a line. He marks it out with a pencil. He shapes it with planes and marks it with a compass. He shapes it into a figure of a man with the beauty of a man to dwell in a house. He cuts down cedars, or he chooses a cypress tree or an oak and lets it grow strong among the trees of the forest. He plants a cedar, and the rains nourish it. Then it becomes fuel for a man. He takes part of it and he warms himself. He kindles a fire, bakes bread, and he makes a god and worship it. He makes it an idol and falls down before it. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over the half he eats meat. He roasts it and is satisfied. He also warms himself and said, aha, I'm warm. I've seen the fire. And the rest of it he makes into a god. His idol falls down to it and worships it. He prays to it and says, Lord, deliver me, for you are my God. They know not, nor do they discern, for he has shut their eyes so they cannot see, and their hearts so they cannot understand. No one considers, nor is there knowledge or discernment to say, half of it I burned in the fire, and I break bread and on its coals. I roasted meat and I've eaten, and I shall make the rest of it an abomination. Shall I fall down before a block of wood? He feeds on ashes. The deluded heart has led him astray. He cannot deliver himself or say, is there not a lie in my right hand? Now, here's the reason I love that, and I kind of laugh. Okay, like let's just imagine that yesterday, it was a Saturday, and we had nothing going on. We're like, hey, let's get in the car and go to IKEA. You go to IKEA, you buy a table, come home, build it together, then you have dinner at the table, and then after you've had dinner and a nice meal together, you bow down and you worship the table that you built at IKEA. You're like, that's just crazy. That's ludicrous. And I think that's the challenge when we think about idolatry, right? We're like, we would never do such. And that's the wrestle, the tension. The tension is the comparative approach. There's nothing that I have that's better than God. And there's nothing that I have when I really look at it and the source that it provides that I would think is better than God. But the challenge is that we don't always understand what idolatry is in our current day. And it hasn't really changed that much. This guy, as it's being demonstrated, Isaiah is preaching to a nation called Israel who there's only two remaining tribes in the southern part of the nation that are existing. And he goes, listen, it's dangerous because you guys have created idols. Now, some of the idols were carved idols that other countries had, and they put in their back yard, like Asherah poles or the Baals, right? And they bowed down to them. But so much of their idolatry was also getting in the camp with foreign nations, like trusting in Assyria for its strength, or going to their kings for riches and wealth, or when they lacked provision, they would go to another nation and they would do trades and resources and all these things. Not always was it tangible, but the reality is that they struggled with this idea of idolatry. When we think idolatry, I think we think a piece of wood, and we think that's so silly. We would never carve up a sculpture, set it on our nightstand, and go, you know what, every night before I go to bed, I'm going to bow down to this thing. That just doesn't even seem plausible to most of us. But the question is what is it that we might struggle with? Let me just list a few that sometimes grip my heart. Pleasure. Grades, that never really got me. I was never really worried about grades. Some of y'all were. Yeah, I was never worried about that. Sports, though, I loved sports. Money, I still like that. Anybody like money? Anybody lying? For some of us, it's video games. Some of it's relationships. Maybe it's a tasty meal. It's food. A fit body, working out. Maybe it's a band or particular music group. Or maybe it's just music in general. Maybe it's media, social media. Maybe for some of us in here, it's deer hunting or clothing or shopping. Maybe it's, hold on guys, plug your ears. We're in East Texas. Guns and more guns. For some, it's pets, portfolios. For some of us, maybe fantasy sports. That's right around the corner. Vehicles, land. When you have land, you have to have equipment. The list is endless, right? Do you ever, when you really think about it, find yourself worshiping or in some ways bowing down to something like those things? Something that only God could really provide you? Does that ever happen? Is there anything in your life that you've ever overvalued that you look back at it was pretty silly? Okay, so Joe Robideau is our new executive pastor here. Joe pastored in Alaska for 9 years, been in ministry for 20 plus years. And he recently moved here, but what's interesting is he moved from Alaska and he shipped his stuff in April and it still hasn't arrived. So he's like, I'm starting to kind of get a little bit anxious. I know it's not that big of a deal. Well, we were planning and thinking about this message. Well, he was telling me that, hey, my heartstrings are starting to be pulled in a direction I didn't think they would. He's like, so in my family, because we got this old chair. It's an heirloom. He's like from the 1800s. He's like, I'd really like to have that. And he goes, but that's not the thing that I'm really wanting. And I'm like, okay. He goes, I also have, a couple other things. He goes, I've got a coin collection from my grandfather. I'm kind of excited. I would like to see that. He goes, Brandon, don't judge me. And y'all don't judge him either. And don't judge me for telling y'all this. But he said, the thing I'm really struggling with is my Nintendo. Super Nintendo has not arrived. And he's like, I don't think I could live without my Super Nintendo. That's silly, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, I would never have to worry about a Super Nintendo because I never had one. Yeah. But my Nintendo, that was pretty awesome. But here's the thing, what really is really gripping my heart in this season of my life is this thing right here. Now, when you see it, that's Carter. That's our youngest. I had him earlier, okay? But here's the deal. The other day, I left for the office, and I got about halfway to the office, and I realized, oh, I don't have my phone. And there's a part of me that for a second, I'm like, I can make it at least through lunchtime without my phone, or maybe I can go a whole day without my phone. But in the last 3 times I've left my phone somewhere, the thing that I convinced myself is I can't go anywhere without it. And why is that? Is it because I would bow down to that? No, there's never been a time, so I'm just full confession, I've never bowed down to that. It sits on my nightstand. I've never thought, oh, wow, oh, holy iPhone, you are so worthy. But I'm telling you, I had to do a quick U-turn and go get it, and here's why. Everything in my life is tied to this thing. Now, I don't want to offend anybody, and I obviously did this in the first service. I'm going to raise my age just 5 years. If you're 60 and older, do y'all know that you can actually pay for things with this? They're like, this is my wallet, too. Some of you are like, I knew that. Yes. I got scolded by somebody earlier about that. So you can pay for it, right? But not only can you pay for things with this, my connections to work on it, my friends, my email, social media accounts, my bank accounts, my stock, anything is all tied to this. News, right? Who reads a newspaper anymore? If I just offended you there too, I'm sorry, genuinely. Like, the deal is everything that I need is pretty much on this. And even the things I don't need are tied to this. And so there's something that was weird that happened to me the other day, and I have to turn around. I'm like, why can't I go without it? And I'm like, because there's so much here. And I think there is something that's true about idolatry that we have to pay attention to, and sometimes we miss because of the integrated approach, that we see certain things from it, but it's hard to kind of narrow it down to the source at times. What do I mean by that? We'll see it in a second in Romans 1. But oftentimes, I think what we try to do in idolatry is we get attracted to something that we can actually see and touch. We seem to desire that more than some of the invisible attributes. What do I mean by that? Well, in Romans chapter 1, you get to see a little bit more of that because it may seem almost too simplistic that you would be drawn to something that you could actually tangibly see or tangibly touch. But it seems to be that way in Romans 1. In Romans 1, Paul addresses the same thing that Isaiah the prophet was doing in Isaiah 44. It seems really silly in Isaiah 44 because a dude takes and cuts down a tree he's recently grown in the forest. Half of it he uses for his own resources, and the other half he makes a god who can't see, hear, or understand. He bows down to it. But in Romans 1, beginning in verse 18, Paul writes to the church of Rome, and he says this. He says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. You could highlight or underline verse 19, that it should be plain to us. Here it is, because verse 20, his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. You see what's being said here? You and I ought to be able to know that there's nothing that compares to God in the comparative approach because you can see his invisible attributes. The God who's worth worshiping is seen not by eye, but by what he does. That's the integrative approach. He goes on in verse 21. But for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Why? Because what they began to do is began to see that the things that came from God were gods themselves rather than the God who gave them the thing. It's when stuff becomes more important than the God who gives stuff, which is the wrestle, right, between the comparative and integrative approach. Is the wrestle between complacency and contentment. And the reason why is because we can easily look and say, well, God is good, and I know that he gives good stuff. I mean, James, the brother of Jesus, says every good and perfect gift is from above. So he gives all these good things, and we should enjoy them. The question is, are we enjoying the thing more than we are enjoying the God who gives the thing? And that's the wrestle. Well, in Romans, it says that they didn't honor him. They became futile in their thinking. Their foolish hearts were darkened. Claimed to be wise, they became fools. And they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up to the lust of their hearts, to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. Paul was trying to help them understand, if you don't destroy the idols, they will destroy you. So if you don't pay attention to this, it will become a big deal. Verse 25 says, because they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and they worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. In essence, instead of tracking back the good things to the actual source, which the integrated approach tells us to do, it's not the sun rays that we are enamored by, it's the actual sun. It's not the painted view of a sunset or a sunrise that it should enamor us. It's that it came from somewhere, right? That's the idea. But if not careful, we'll value what we see or what we can touch more than the one who gives it. Now, here's what's crazy, is that you see this happen all the time throughout the Bible. But here it is, made things were meant to make invisible attributes visible. So made things, whatever you can see and touch, the whole purpose of it was to make invisible attributes visible. So here we are. sunsets, wildlife, a beautiful meadow, a rainstorm, magnificent mountains. All of those things should point us back to God. Do y'all agree with that? Beautiful beaches. Oh, that sounds fantastic for some of us, right? A great meal. Cuisine that has multiple flavors tied to it. And you're like, I can't quite pinpoint what that is, but it's the best thing I've ever eaten. The hardest time you've ever laughed, that belly roll, the child that you hold in your arms that just fills you with love. All these things should point us back to a creator. It's not the thing that fulfills our heart, but it's the one who gives it that should fulfill our heart. But the problem is that if not careful, like what happened in Isaiah and also in Romans 1, is we have a tendency to suppress the truth. We have a tendency to not be honest about what's really going on in our heart and even not be able to be honest about what's happening in our culture. And the reason why is because ever since the fall of man, we as people, humanity, have a tendency to not only suppress the truth and not be totally honest, but to not really pay attention to idolatry because we think it's an antiquated idea. Well, let me just show something to you. And for me, when I saw this many years ago in Scripture, it was a game changer for me. And the reason it's a game changer is because right now we live in a place where everything is flipped upside down. And for us to get this thing right in our hearts, we have to realize that it's flipped upside down in our life. And we've got to trust God to course correct it. So let's just go back to the original creation. Y'all remember old school back in Genesis? God created everything we see and know, and even the things we don't see and know in 6 days. On the sixth day, he created man. This is how he did it. He established an order where God was at the top, and then he had mankind or humanity. And then after that, it was the creation. And it's interesting because as God created all these things, he said, and it was good. And that was the intended order. Can we agree on that? Everybody see that on the way back in the back? All you people with 60 and have iPhones? Here we go. But here's what happened is that once man sinned, it got distorted. And it's interesting because where is God now in the order of our lives? And I know you're like, well, he's at the top. That's the comparative approach. Oh, he's at the top. No, but actually the culture and what Paul says to the church of Rome is that God is at the bottom. Then it's mankind. Interesting enough, you don't see this, but right after that, you have mankind's creation. That's the creation of man. And then here's God's creation. How do I know that? Because we can conclude decisions like, hey, woman's in control of her body. Now, I don't mean to offend you, but you only conclude that if you put God's creation at the very top, which we are a part of that. But that's why we oftentimes will treat pets better than humans. Or we have strong feelings about trees and forests and the earth. And does that make sense? I'm not hating on anybody, it's just facts. Then you got the creation of man. What is the creation of man? It's the creation that man happens because we are creative like our God. So we are image bearers of God. And one of the things that God is a creative God. And so we are too. The problem is that when we begin to create things, oftentimes we do it from the wrong vantage point. How do I know that? Because in Genesis 10, there was a guy named Nimrod. Good name, isn't it? You know what Nimrod did? He said, hey, let's come and build a tower. And then he said this, and let us make a name for ourselves. And that's what happens. God's at the bottom. His creation and the created things are here, and then mankind is here. Do you see the flipped order? Now, why does that matter? The reason it matters is because when we get out of whack, we begin to miss what really could be vying for our hearts and our attention. Here's the things you have to understand. And I'm going to put 3 truths for you real quickly. I've already shared one of them, but I'm going to give it to you again just so you see it. Number 1, made things make invisible attributes visible. Okay? 2, you and I are a made thing. 3, therefore you and I make invisible attributes visible. So we are created in God's image to express God's to others, which means we are a billboard for God. Why does that matter? Because if we don't understand what's vying for our heart's attention, we may be communicating the wrong idea to others. But we may say, well, God's got all my heart, but then people are looking at our lives and they're going, well, your billboard of your life is telling something totally different. Now, I don't know about you. Have you ever been driving down the road and you saw a billboard and you thought, you know what? The billboard is better than the actual place. Anybody, like, you driving down I-20 and you see the Buc-ee's sign and you're like, hey, let's pull over right here. Kids, this is going to be better than actual Buc-ee's. Hey, just go pee right over there. It's going to be awesome. No. You've never stopped at a billboard. Anybody ever stopped at a billboard? No. You don't stop at billboards, do you? Now, listen, I'll just tell you, quick caveat. If you know me, I'm a Buc-ee's fan. If I see a Buc-ee's sign, we're going to Buc-ee's. This is. I can get in my car in the morning, instead of going to work, it tells me Buc-ee's 28 miles away. I kid you not, it's happened. So here's the deal. If we're driving down the interstate, there's never been a time where kids are like, hey, there's a Buc-ee's. And I pull over into the sign. All I know is Buc-ee's 30 miles away, and we're holding it until we get there. I got to pee now. I'm like, we're holding it. We're going to Buc-ee's. But the deal is this. The billboard is not the thing. Y'all agree with that? So here's what's interesting. When you have an idol, you take the billboard and you make it the thing. And that's ludicrous, right? You would never take an IKEA table or a piece of wood and warm your food and also worship it. And we laugh at that and we're like, oh yeah, we don't struggle with idolatry. But where we do struggle is to not be the billboard that shows others what God is wanting to communicate through us. If your life is a billboard, it is telling others something about God. The question you have to ask yourself is, what is it telling others about God? For instance, if I were to say it this way, you are a billboard, but not the destination, would it change anything for you? You're the billboard, but you're not the destination. So for you and I, we're tempted. If you're honest, I can do this. I can look and see the house I own and the land I have and all the work, all the investment, all the hours. And I have a tendency to go, look what I've built. Look what I've built. Oh, look at all the hard work I've put in. Like, you can get to the end of a project and be like, whoo, baby, look what I've done, right? And we don't even mean anything by it, because it's this tension between complacency and contentment, and this hard, strange thing that's going through us. But if not careful, we can look at the things that fulfill us and see them as the source when they're not intended to be. Does that make sense? So think about this. What are you communicating about God right now in your marriage? What about in your parenting? What do you think you're communicating in your speech? The things that you say about God or the things you say about others? What do you think about your work ethic or your response in conflict when things get hard and you get squeezed in life? What are you saying? What about forgiveness? I'll tell you the area right now that, and there's multiple, that if I'm just honest with you, one of the areas I see me struggling in right now is patience. I'm not very patient in this season of my life. I want things done now, not in a little while. Well, I got to go get a drink of water. This isn't the time to get a drink of water. This is time to finish our project. And I could just see this thing kind of just bubbling up inside of me, if not careful, that doesn't communicate even the heart of God. And the reason why is because I have goals and I have objectives and I have things to accomplish. And I'll just tell you, I'm probably one of the most unrealistic people on the planet. I have a list of 20 things, and I can say, you know what, I'll be there tomorrow. I'll get all that done. The problem is that I didn't get 3 done, and it was 8 p.m. But I thought, literally, I'm going to get all that done today. Anybody else struggle with that? Why is that? It's because I think that I can do it all. And then when it doesn't get done in the timeline or the way I want done, then something unravels inside of me. I find myself frustrated, and I find myself communicating to others that I'm strong enough and I am thorough and swift enough. And then it overflows into other people that I love, and it communicates something different than the actual heart of God. If you're a billboard and you're not the destination, what should your billboard be saying? What's it currently saying? And here's the crazy thing is it's a truth that should confront us daily. And the reason why, Isaiah said it, and he also, we're reminded about it in Psalm 115, that if you're not careful, you will create a God who cannot see, cannot hear, and cannot smell, and he cannot respond to you. But what's interesting in Psalm 115, verse 8, it says this, and those who make idols become like them. The reason this is so important, because what you behold is what you will become. What rules your heart is what will shape you. And is this an area we have to pay attention to? You're a billboard, and you're communicating something. In every conversation, in every list or task management thing you have going on, and every time you pick up your phone, and every time you spend hours on it, I won't check that, right? You're communicating something. Lord, help us to be transformed so that we communicate something that's of your likeness. I need help with that. And I would imagine there's a few others in here that might be speaking to you as well. May the Lord help us. And that's the cool thing. This isn't a message to guilt you or to manipulate this. It's just to say, hey, let's pay attention to what's ruling the heart of our lives and make sure that we're not foolish in the comparative approach. Oh, God, you win every time. And let's look at the integrative approach. Am I worshiping the source, or am I worshiping the thing the source provides? Just be careful to say, Lord, I love you, and not, come, let me make a name for myself. Let me pray. Father, I thank you for this morning, and I pray, Lord, that you would use everything in our life to teach us more about you. Every person in this room is serving a God in his life, little or big, and every person in this room is being transformed into the image of that God. So, Lord, would you help me and my friends here to be transformed into the image of our great, wonderful, and excellent King? May our life, our speech, our conduct, everything we do display the glory of a loving and gracious God. May we be reminded today that we are living, walking, talking gospel proclamation and a billboard to others. May they see you in us. In Jesus' name, amen.